Hello everyone. Today we're going to go over a Node module authentication method that I like to use sort of on a regular basis for these type of projects. The packages that we're going to be using are bcryptjs for encryption of the hashing of information coming in, config, which is similar to .env. It's an environment variable helper. Express, of course. We're going to use Express Validator to help us do some validation on the back end. JSonwebtoken to help us manage our access, page access, and then, of course, Mongoose, which is our database layer. I also have a couple of dev dependencies concurrently to unify the front end and back end, and Nodeman to make our starting and restarting of development server more automated. I recommend installing these before you get started. I have it in this folder here, which is AAA tester. I've already installed the modules. I already have a git ignore, which I recommend you also installing. I also have a basic server set up. So right now, I've brought in Express. I've set in a basic endpoint. I have my server for 5,000 because the client folder will be 3,000 in React. Let's go ahead and test the server. In my package JSON here, I have set up the scripts to run concurrently in a dev mode, and also NodeMon is set up as well to automate. So I'll go ahead and run the server because we don't have a front end yet. So npm run server, and this will show us that our server is running. So we have a basic server running right here. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and connect our MongoDB to our application. I've already set up a cluster in Atlas. We're using the cloud version of MongoDB. And you can set up a free account. Once you do, and you get into your cluster, there's a connection area that you can go ahead and get a connect to your application string. You just grab it and then you fill it in with your username and password. Okay, so I've already grabbed what I need to connect to this database. And what I need to set up in here is a folder. We're going to use config package to manage the global variable of this. So we need to set up a folder inside here called config. And inside there, we're going to put a file, and it's going to be a JSON file. So we're going to call it default JSON because that's what keeps it invisible, basically. And that's how config works, as opposed to .env. It brings everything into a JSON format, and then we can use the key value pairs and stuff like that. So, okay, so we'll go ahead and set up our default JSON here, where we're going to keep our credentials. And we'll put this in here. And this is the string connection from MongoDB. And we'll save that. Everything's still working. So now that we have our credentials in a safe environment, let's go ahead and create a module that will use it and connect to the database. So let's add another file within the config called db.js. And in here, we're going to add a few packages that we're going to need first. So I'm just going to copy and paste them in. We're bringing in Mongoose because that's what we need to connect to the database config so that we can use the environment variable we just created. And this is also config using drilling down into the Mongo URI that we're going to need. So I'm going to go ahead and add an async await function. So we're going to call this connect db, and we'll go async, and so inside this I'm going to use a try catch, which is, and let's add the parameter there. Okay, so this handles our error if anything happens. And then here, okay, here I'm adding our await, and this is our connection to the database. These are just some additional updates that that upgrade deprecations of previous versions in MongoDB. So it just gives us less errors when we apply those updates. All right, so I went ahead and Controlled C to get out of my server. We need to bring in these credentials and stuff to use in the server. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste a few things just to make it a little bit faster. So we are going to need the actual function. So that's what I'm calling from inside that db.js file in the config folder. And then, of course, we have to import it up here, or I should say require it. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that. And let's run it. npm run server. Okay, Nodeman. Okay, so there we go. We're connected to our MongoDB as well as to our server. So next we'll set up some basic routes so we can test to see if we could hit them. So I'm going to go ahead and set up another folder within our application here. I'm going to call it routes. And because everything's a JSON API, I'm just going to put another folder in here and just call it API. It's just the way I want to do it. You can do it any way you'd like. That I'm going to add a file for each route. So users, so each one of these routes here will pertain to the code that we make for it to be our API. So, okay, so now that we have each of these route files here, put in some generic filler for now. So we'll use express router and express first of all. And we need to bring in. And we'll just go ahead and just send out a basic message to a basic path. So I was thinking something like this. So we use express router get to a path of root, and then we'll send a message that we're on. We'll just say this is the auth route view. So this will let us know when we try to hit the page, it should deliver us this message if it's successful. And then, of course, we have to make sure that we export and let's do this. This is just basically a message send to let us know that when we go to this route at the root, it should deliver this message. This is just for testing and for us to make sure that our routes are working. So I'm going to copy and paste this one. And basically just do it for each of these pages. We're going to need to bring in the routes that we made into the server file. So I'll put it here under that generic route and we'll paste it in there. And basically I'm using the app.use on the root and establishing the route in the API to the route of the code where we store the API. So that's where we create our connection. Okay, I'm gonna have to clean up some stuff. I have some extra things in here. I think that should do it. Let's go ahead and save it. So let's go ahead and test with Postman. I'm gonna bring over Postman here. Using this address here, I'm gonna try to hit the auth route, post route, profile, and user route to see if they're working. And if they are working, I should see the messages that I put in here. So let's see if that's happening. Okay, so this is the route for auth. We'll go ahead and send that. Okay, that's working. Let's go ahead and try posts. That's working. Let's try profile. Okay. And users. Excellent. Okay, so we have our routes being recognized. So we're going to go on to the next step. Okay, so now that we got that done, I'm going to go ahead and make a models folder here in the root. And we're going to go ahead and add a users file. Models are usually with a capital letter. There we go. Okay, now that we have that, I'm just gonna copy and paste the schema and mongoose model once again to save us time. So I'm gonna paste that there, and let's take a look at it. I went ahead and required mongoose. I named the schema user schema. Exported it down here, and made certain fields required. Email has to be unique. This is like for an image, and this puts in the current date once it's published in the models folder. Okay, so now that we have our users model, I'm going to close that here. I'm going to go to the users route file. Yeah, we're going to build out a few things here because we need to register a user, log in a user, all that kind of stuff. Try seeing if rec.body is working. This is how we get all of our data into the page. In order for this to work, we need to use the middleware in the server. So body parser used to be a separate package, which let us use rec.body. Now it's built into Express. We need to add this line right here. And this will basically make it so that it activates body parser, which in turn activates rect.body. All right, so let's test it. So let's make sure this is saved. I'm going to open Postman again. And in the user routes here, I'm going to change this to a post request. Actually, we're going to have to change this to a post. And I'll save. And then let's go to Postman. We're in users, post, and then before we can send anything, we have to pass a few things in the header. Okay, I'm going to disable this for now. We'll need that later. But here, we're going to need a content type. Application JSON. And then we're going to go to the body, and we're going to select raw JSON. And then inside the JSON brackets there, we're going to need to add, let's try adding like a name. Let's try sending. Okay, so down here, it's telling me that it has succeeded, but let's look inside our terminal, and you see it passes the data in. So this means that the rect.body is working, so that's good. I'm going to add some validation. And we're using Express Validator. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste a few things in here. So within these parameters right here, I'm going to add this. And this is from Express Validator here. You can check it out in the documentation later. And then I am going to need a comma right there. And then within the request response, where this is, I'm going to replace it with okay, this is what I replaced it with here. It's error validation results. And basically, if there is an error, return a status of 400 with a message. So let me fix a couple things. Okay, I think I'm getting an error right here. So I think what I forgot to do is make it an object. So okay, that should take care of it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Postman. We're in the route we need to be in, and I'm going to run it, and it should give me an error because I don't have all the information that's required. So let's see what it gives me down here. Okay, so see how because there was an error, it's because I didn't have a password and all that other stuff. So, but our messages are coming across clearly explaining why. So that means the validation is working. Excellent. We're still working in our user route. I'm gonna close these others while we're here. So since we're dealing with promises and async await, here put in a try catch and start making lists of approach to encrypt our password and get our token. So rect.body to bring in the name, the email, and password. I'm going to use some destructuring to do it. So now I'm going to go ahead and insert a try catch to move this. So I just moved it in here, and I'm going to change this to user registered, by the way. And our to-do basically is to see if the user already exists, and then we need to encrypt the password, and then we need to return the web token. So let's go ahead and start with see if user already exists. So we'll start with creating a let user, and then since we're using async and await, add async here. Okay, so what we're doing here is find the user by email, since the emails are unique in our model. So once that is determined, we're adding an if statement here, and if the user does exist, we need to return an error message, basically saying that it does. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So that's us finding if the user already exists. We need to bring in our model here, or none of this will work. Okay, so this goes out to up to our model and users here. I had some connection issues there, and what I did is I basically just made sure that this was the right path. The next thing we need to do is encrypt our password. So I'm going to modify my to-do here a little bit. So I'm going to create an instance of the user. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to add salt encryption. So let's create a salt. So we're making a salt. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and get the password and then apply the hash to the password with the salt. And we do that by specifying that here. None of this has been saved, so we need to do that here. And then our user is saved and hashed. So now we have a new instance of it with the hashed password. Okay, so now that we are using bcrypt, we got to make sure that we imported it up top. I'm going to go ahead and test it here just to see if we can register a user, and then we'll start working on applying a token. Okay, so let's try going to Postman, and this is the route that we're looking for. Register user, and in your header, I'm doing a post because we're trying to register a user. And before you start, make sure that in your headers, you create a content type and make sure that it's a application JSON so that it can be sent correctly in the right format. And then in the body over here, I'm using raw. And then within a JSON object, I've added in correct formatting a name, email, and password. I've already entered this one in the database. So I'm going to change this one at Bob. So let's see what happens when we submit this. Oh, server error. Let's find out. So it looks like I got a server error. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and image is not defined. So I think it's because I'm bringing in my instance here. So let's save that. Let's try it again. Okay, Bob, here we go. Okay, so it worked this time. User registered. So let's go check MongoDB. And I'm going to refresh my instance here. So there should be another user. named Bob. So it brought in Bob. There's Bob mail, and look what it did to the password. It hashed it. So that's working, and then put in the correct time and date. Excellent. Let's go ahead and start working on returning the token. So I am going to copy and paste some stuff here. I recommend you guys checking out jwt.io. It breaks down how the token works. It's into a three-part type of signature. It's JWT.io. And the payload is what we are concerned with. That's what comes back to us as the token. Make our payload to get the ID that we need. I'm going to put it here with a few comments. Okay, so returns the web token. With the payload, attaches the user ID to the token. So what we've done here is got the payload because we're using JWT and we're assigning the user ID to it. And under the payload, we're going to go ahead and make our JWT function here. Basically, it signs. It's a function that brings in the payload, and then you need a secret, and that's just one of the authentications that they use. I'll show you where we go with that. These are some options. I have it to expire in 5 days. I'm going to say 3 actually, and it gives us error message if there's any issue here. And we also have to make sure that we're bringing in the package for jsonwebtoken. So I'll go ahead and put that there. Okay, so I tested to see if my error was working here. This is a user that's already in the database, so when I try to send it, it brings me back an error that says user already exists, so that's working. I'm going to go to my database here and just delete this. I'm going to start fresh and try to get a token back when we add the user here. So go ahead and delete that. Okay, so our Mongo Atlas is clear. We have a collection that's empty. I cleared out the existing user that we put in there. So I'm going to go back to Postman. I'm going to register Bob again. This time we should get a token back from JWT. Okay, and there we go. So it's basically gave us an encrypted token that we can now use in the header to determine access to pages that are restricted. So great, it's working exactly the way we want to. Okay, next we're going to make some custom middleware that will use the token so that we can verify it and then use it to access restricted pages. So I'm going to make a folder in the root called middleware. And inside there, I'm going to put a file called auth. You could call it isauth if you want. Whatever you want to call it. All right, so we need to bring in the packages that we'll need to make this work. So jsonwebtoken and config. First, we'll get the token from the header. We'll even call it token, and then we'll use this as a key that we'll use in our header, sort of as an ID. And then we need to check for the token. And this is, if it doesn't exist, then it'll tell us in plain English, no token authorization denied. And then finally, we will verify a token if there is one. And it uses the secret that we have in our config folder. And then it decodes it and uses it. So that's all we need for this middleware here. So here, when we verify the token, we'll be able to use the user that's identified by the ID from the payload and the token and access any of the routes. Now that we have our middleware right here, let's go ahead and bring it into this auth route. So I'm going to open up this file here, and I'm going to bring in the middleware. Now, in order to secure the route, you just add the file name right there. So now that we just add this here, and that protects the route because of the middleware using the token that we made. Now that we've added our authorization here to the route, let's go to Postman to give it a test. Here I am in the actual route. I'm doing a GET request, and I have nothing in the headers right now. So trying to access this route, I've already tried it once. So let's do it again. And we get the message, no token, authorization is denied. So it's working. The path is being secured. So I'm going to go back to my register user here, where I've generated a token earlier. And I'm going to copy this token and go back here into my header. And I put this in earlier. It's that X auth token that we used earlier. And we're going to use the token that I just grabbed here. So let's try it again. Boom. Okay, so now that we're able to access the secure route, let's try to bring back some user data as a result here. So we're doing a try catch in here, which I'm going to paste. And since we're using await, we have to make sure that we add async here. So what we have going on here in the try is that we're going to find by ID because we want the specific user. We're using the rec.userid to bring in the data that we need. And here we don't want the password to be shown. So using the -password in the select, make sure that it doesn't show up. And then we get the user. And then if there's any errors, we handle it here. Okay, and we need to bring in a few packages now that we're importing some other things. Okay, so we need to get our users table here. So let's do that. Users. Okay, file save. Okay, let's see what happens. I'm using this token from an active user that's in the database in here in the header. So boom. That's exactly what we wanted. We wanted to get the user that is authorized by using the token. So now we have access as the user to the authorized routes. So now that we are able to register and get a token, we still need to be able to log in after we do all that. So what we can do is go to the user route and basically copy this whole router post right here. So you could just basically copy this whole thing and then bring it into underneath here. And then we're going to do some alterations to it. The one I'm pasting in already has the alterations that we need done for it to work in this page. let's go through it. Here, what we've done is modified it to only validate the email and password. Pretty much the rest is the same. We check for the invalid credentials if it doesn't match. Once again, we're using the email and password here with the rec.body. We're checking to see if the email is there. And then if there is no user, invalid credentials. If it doesn't match, invalid credentials. We're using the payload again with the secret because we have to verify the token. And that's it. Okay, let's go ahead and require a package that we do need. Express validator. Okay, so now if we added this in correctly, we should be able to see what we want to see. So, okay, so we're going to go ahead and test this in Postman. This is about a user that's already exists and to see if we could log in. So we got to make sure that we have a content type here in the header with the application JSON. And then over here in the body, under raw, and make sure that I select raw. In a JSON format, I have email and a password. And in our database, the only name I have right now is Bob and Bob Mail. So let's see what happens if I try to enter this here. Okay, so we're getting exactly what we want. It's invalid credentials. So what I'm going to do is use Bob's credentials and see if it works. So let's try that. Oh, and password is required. Okay, see, I did it without the password. So it looks like all of our validation is working pretty good. So let's try it with the password. And now let's go ahead and try it with credentials that we know are in the database. Okay, we need to add a package or two here in order for this to work. So let's add bcrypt here. Okay, we need these packages as well. All right, let's try to log in as the user. Okay, there we go. We're getting a token. So not only can we register and get a token, but as a user that already exists in the database now, we can go in and get a token. Great. Okay, that's pretty much it for this part of the authentication, but this should get you going as far as having something to work with.